So now we'll move into the responsibilities in the fall. So if you are a beekeeper and there is a country fair in your community, please do reach out and find them and do a entry in your fair, whether you have one jar of honey or a chunk of wax, or you just took a great photograph of your bees entering the hive. But definitely find those beekeepers that are in your community and start to connect with them, because one of the most important things that we can do is start to discuss our ideas with other people, find out what works for them and why. And definitely if you can find the club in your area, join that as well. I'm not a huge proponent of clubs because a lot of them are very focused on what pharmaceutical or pesticide to use in the hive on a regular basis and the cycle in which that's appropriate. And a lot of the clubs in the areas are challenged by the notion that maybe pharmaceuticals and pesticides aren't necessarily like what to do. And so having that first discussion of whether or not you want to use them, but that's a decision that everybody makes. Another thing that we do in the autumn is we take stock of what we have from this year, what we liked, what we didn't like, if we bought a piece of equipment that we thought was really fantastic, and whether or not it worked out the way we wanted, what kind of expansion or contraction we want to do in our apiary for what we expect to happen in our year life in the following year. During the autumn, you definitely want to research spring bees, where you want to get bees from, why. It's not just as simple as, oh, they have bees. There are lots of kinds of bees, and it's a fantastic time to start getting yourself informed about that. And then again, in the fall, we plant pastures and timbers, which will participate in not just raising the bees, but also planting permanent food. Now, a fall or autumn, again, can be a strange time with feeding. If there's been a really abundant summer, you may not have anything to worry about. If there has been an extensive nectar dearth, you may be feeding in the fall before what's called the fall flow comes on, when the earth starts to get damp again and it's still warm enough that things are going to bud, but not so warm that we have our spring plants. Now, the honeybees during the autumn are focused 100% on stores, as we discussed in the section when we talked about the drone bees. This is when the drone bees are going to get kicked out of the hive. The worker bees are not going to allow for unproductive resources to be hanging out in the hive all winter when they're balling up and trying to make sure that their resources last for long enough. And there are no queens mating during winter, so they kick the boys out, and they're very, very protective of their hive. Unless you absolutely have to, this is not a great time to be doing inspections. You should probably really leave your bees alone if they have adequate stores. So just like breaking capped honey during this time can cause a really protective response. So basically, you're going to feed or not feed, and the die is kind of cast for whether or not your bees are going to have adequate stores for winter, based upon your supplemental feeding, but really not a ton to inspect during this time, and probably not the most fun inspections of the year. Now, there are, in terms of the pastures and timbers, there is something called a fall flow, and we'll talk about those plants. Um, so goldenrod, we see a lot in just waste places, a lot of weeds and thistles and asters. Asters are like a daisy type plant, and they have such stinky, stinky honey. It's funny. Sometimes people will be checking on their bees when they get asters, and um, they they don't realize the really, really awful smell that they smell is it's like socks, gym socks is aster honey. So a great timber for autumn that is typically not in our area, but is something that beekeepers could definitely consider, is the BB tree or the avodia tree. Super prolific bee tree and can make huge, huge impact on whether or not your hive is able to survive hive over winter. So, and then the loquat, but not a huge um, time that we can impact. Really, the leaving, if you have sort of wild edges on your property and are able to leave those margins to the woods alone so that you give a little bit of more space for weeds and give some space for nature to kind of bramble a little bit, you'll get some nice um, nice pasture for your bees. So that is kind of the year in a nutshell. What you want to plan to do is plant. Beekeepers are typically gardeners or work closely with them. So everything that you can do in your community to impact specifically timbers, getting those trees up, because they don't blossom out in a year. So that's something that you enjoy from long-term planning. Um, and then pastures, making sure that the spaces that would otherwise be can be productive. Bee food. We always want to keep tabs on the state of the bees' food and water. Providing a little watering dish or something like that on your patio can make it very enjoyable for you to enjoy your bees without having to be right up in the hive. Um, every season that you are in, you will always be preparing for the next season. So beekeeping is very much an activity that is in alignment with the wheel of the year. So, learn from what's happened, plan for what's coming, and enjoy what you're doing right now. And know also with confidence that you usually don't have to take some massive action. You usually don't have to squish a queen or tear a colony apart or do anything like that. The bees know what they're doing, and you are mostly a curious participant or curious guest in their hive, if you will. So, and sometimes a provider of sustenance. So I hope with that you will enjoy having bees, and our next session we will actually be doing our installation. So we look forward to seeing you for that.